Human blood stained the walls of the Iconian throne room as primitive bullets and blades carved apart the Emperor's elite guards. The most technologically advanced empire in the galaxy, humiliated by the crude weapons of a fledgling race. Captain Nolan Adams sat in the briefing room aboard the UES Indomitable, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. On the view screen, Admiral Sanchez's face was grave. "The Iconian Empire has declared war," Sanchez said. His voice was heavy. "Their ultimatum is simple. Humanity must submit as a protectorate species or face annihilation." Nolan's gut clenched. Earth had only begun to expand into the stars a century ago. Their ships were rudimentary, their weapons laughable, compared to the Iconians' world-ending arsenals. "High Command wants to sue for peace," Sanchez continued. "But I have another plan. A strike team infiltrating the heart of the Iconian Empire, kidnap the Emperor himself, and force a ceasefire." "That's suicide," Nolan blurted out. "Their defenses—" "Have a critical weakness." Sanchez's eyes gleamed. "We've discovered that archaic human weapons are virtually invisible to their sensors. Bullets can pierce their shielding. You and your team will go in armed to the teeth with 21st century rifles and 26th century stealth tech." Nolan's mind raced. It was an insane gambit, but if they pulled it off— "You're our only hope, Nolan," Sanchez said quietly. "If you fail, Earth falls, humanity becomes slaves or worse." Nolan stood, his spine straight, his jaw set. "Mission accepted, sir. When do we start?" Nolan's first stop was the barracks of the UES Indomitable's most elite soldiers. He had handpicked this team for their unique skills and unshakable resolve in the face of impossible odds. Jack Boom Boom Riggs was in the armory, meticulously inspecting a block of C4. As the team's demolitions expert, he knew that one misplaced wire could spell the difference between a successful breach and a disastrous failure. "Riggs, you're with me," Nolan said. "We've got a mission." Riggs grinned. "About damn time. I was starting to think these bombs would never get a chance to dance." Next, Nolan found Ava Ghost Simmons in the shooting range, putting tight groupings into a target's head with her suppressed M4. Ava was their infiltration specialist, capable of slipping in and out of the most secure facilities like a wraith. Liam Doc O'Connor was in the medbay, poring over Iconian anatomical scans. As a xenobiologist, he was tasked with keeping the team alive in the field and providing intel on their alien adversaries. "Doc, grab your gear," Nolan ordered. "We're going to need your expertise on this one." Finally, Nolan located Riker Hax Mason in the comms room, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he decrypted Iconian transmission protocols. Riker was their tech guru, capable of infiltrating any network and turning the enemy's own systems against them. With the team assembled, Nolan led them to the armory. The walls were lined with archaic weapons, M4 carbines, Glock 19 pistols, Remington 870 shotguns, and racks upon racks of ammunition. There were also modern marvels like adaptive camouflage suits and encrypted comms devices. "Listen up," Nolan said, his voice grave. "We have a mission directly from Admiral Sanchez. It's not going to be easy, and there's a good chance some of us won't make it back." He laid out the plan, the stealthed approach to the Iconian homeworld, the disguised freighter to the surface, the covert infiltration of the Emperor's palace. "This is a capture mission, not an assault," Nolan stressed. "We get in, snatch the Emperor, and get out. Minimal collateral damage. If we kick the hornet's nest, this whole thing falls apart." The team exchanged glances, the weight of the mission settling on their shoulders. They spent the next several days training relentlessly, acclimating to their antiquated arsenal and brushing up on close-quarters combat tactics. As they prepared to ship out, a grim report came in. The Iconians had begun raiding human colonies on the frontier, families ripped apart, settlements burned to ash, the first salvo in a war that threatened to consume the galaxy. Nolan's jaw tightened as he watched the footage of weeping children and smoldering ruins. They were out of time. If they failed, this would be the fate of every human world. "Gear up," he told his team, his voice laced with quiet determination. "We're going to end this war before it starts." The UES Wraith slipped through Iconian space like a phantom, its adaptive camouflage rendering it virtually invisible to enemy sensors. Captain Nolan Adams stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen as they approached the rendezvous point. "Corvus's freighter is on scope," Riker reported from the comms station. "Looks like a rusty bucket of bolts." Nolan nodded. "Perfect. The more nondescript, the better." The Wraith docked with the freighter, and Nolan's team filed into the airlock, weapons at the ready. The door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit cargo bay and the wary face of Corvus. The Iconian smuggler eyed their archaic rifles and tactical gear with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "You humans sure have a strange way of fighting a war." Nolan stepped forward, his hand resting on the butt of his Glock. "Cut the chatter, Corvus. We're here for a job, not a social call." Corvus raised his hands in mock surrender. "Easy there, Captain. We're all friends here, at least until I get my pardon." As the freighter detached from the Wraith and set course for Iconia Prime, tensions ran high among the human operatives. Jack kept a constant watch on Corvus, his finger never far from the trigger of his M4. Ava ghosted through the ship, memorizing every nook and cranny in case they needed a quick escape. Doc, however, saw an opportunity. He approached Corvus in the freighter's mess hall, a datapad in hand. "I've been studying Iconian physiology," he said, sliding into the seat across from the smuggler, "but I'd love to get some first-hand insights." Corvus leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "And why should I help you? Your kind just wants to find new ways to kill us." Doc shook his head. "I'm a medic, not a soldier. My job is to save lives, regardless of species." Over the next few hours, Doc gleaned valuable information from Corvus. He learned that Iconians had highly sensitive auditory systems, vulnerable to certain high-frequency sounds. Their thermoregulatory abilities were also poorly adapted to humid environments, a weakness that could be exploited. Meanwhile, Riker hunched over his laptop in the freighter's cramped bunk room, his face bathed in the glow of the screen. He was crafting a virus designed to infiltrate the Iconian surveillance network, a digital skeleton key that would grant them precious minutes of invisibility. As Iconia Prime loomed in the view screen, Corvus called the team to the bridge. He pulled up a holographic map of the capital city, zooming in on the Emperor's palace. "The palace is heavily guarded," Corvus explained, pointing out the fortified walls and watchtowers. "But every day at noon the Emperor takes a private meal in his garden. That's your best chance to grab him." Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship. An Iconian frigate was hailing them, demanding to board and inspect the freighter. Nolan's heart raced. If they were discovered now, the mission would be over before it began. "Corvus, stall them. Riker, blind their sensors. Everyone else into the shielded compartment. Move." The team scrambled into the hidden cargo hold as Corvus opened a channel with the frigate. He spun a tale of engine troubles and quarantine risks, his silver tongue buying them precious time. Riker's fingers flew over his keyboard, uploading the virus into the frigate's systems. For a few critical seconds, the Iconian ship's sensors went dark. It was all the opening they needed. Corvus guided the freighter into a remote spaceport on the outskirts of the capital, far from prying eyes. As the team disembarked, Nolan clasped the smuggler's arm. "If you betray us," he warned, his voice low, "there's no corner of the galaxy you can hide from me." Corvus met his gaze unflinchingly. "I'm a businessman, Captain. I always deliver on my contracts." The team melted into the bustling streets of the capital, their adaptive camouflage suits blending them into the crowds. Iconian soldiers patrolled the avenues, their energy rifles glinting in the sun. Security drones buzzed overhead, scanning for any signs of trouble. Nolan knew that every step brought them closer to the Emperor and to the fate of humanity itself. They had to succeed. Failure was not an option. Nolan led his team through the bustling streets of the Iconian capital, their adaptive camouflage suits rendering them indistinguishable from the native laborers. They kept their heads down, blending into the crowd, weapons concealed beneath rough-spun cloaks. Ava's sharp eyes scanned the surroundings, alert for any signs of trouble. She noticed a group of Imperial guards clustered around a young Iconian couple, their postures aggressive. The male Iconian stood protectively in front of his partner, but the guards shoved him aside. Nolan saw Ava tense. "Don't," he warned over the encrypted comm. "We can't afford to draw attention." But Ava was already moving, ghosting through the crowd with preternatural grace. In a blur of motion she struck, her hands and feet a whirlwind of precision strikes. The guards crumpled to the ground unconscious before they even realized what hit them. The Iconian couple stared at Ava in awe. The male, a lean figure with intelligent eyes, stepped forward. "You're not from here," he said quietly. "You're the humans, aren't you? The ones who raided the throne room." Nolan cursed under his breath. He motioned for the team to join Ava, their cover blown. "We can't talk here," he said tersely. The Iconian male nodded. "Follow us." He led them into a narrow alleyway, checking for surveillance drones before speaking again. "We're with the Resistance. We've been fighting to overthrow the Emperor for years, but we lack the strength to challenge the Imperial Guard directly." His partner, a fierce-looking female with a scar across her cheek, eyed the humans appraisingly. "But you have the skills and the weapons to strike at the heart of the regime. This could be the spark we need to ignite a revolution." Nolan shook his head. "We're here for the Emperor, not to start a war. I won't risk civilian lives." The male Iconian met his gaze. "This is our fight too. Let us help you reach the palace. We have a network of tunnels, ancient passageways that predate the Emperor's rule. We can guide you in unseen." Nolan hesitated, weighing the risks. But time was running out and they needed local support. "All right," he said finally. "Lead the way." The Resistance fighters guided them to a hidden entrance, a nondescript grate in a forgotten corner of the city. They descended into a labyrinth of tunnels, the air thick with the smell of damp stone and rusting metal. As they navigated the twisting passages, Riker pulled up a holographic map of the palace on his wrist computer. "We're coming up on the south wing," he said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "The Emperor's chambers should be just ahead." Suddenly a squad of Imperial Guard rounded the corner, their energy rifles leveled at the humans. "Intruders," the lead guard shouted. "Open fire!" The tunnel erupted into a fierce firefight. The guards' high-tech weapons pitted against the humans' archaic firearms. But the tight quarters favored the humans, and their bullets tore through the guards' energy shields like they were paper. Liam grunted as a plasma bolt seared across his shoulder, the smell of charred flesh filling the air. Riker took a glancing hit to the leg, stumbling but staying upright. The team pushed forward, leapfrogging from cover to cover until the last guard fell. They breached the Emperor's chambers, weapons at the ready only to find it empty. The opulent room was silent, devoid of any signs of life. A view screen on the far wall flickered to life, revealing Corvus's smirking face. "Congratulations, Captain," he said, his tone mocking. "You've fallen right into my trap." Nolan's blood ran cold. "You betrayed us," he snarled. "You were working for the Emperor all along." Corvus laughed. "Did you really think I would turn against my own people? The Emperor rewards loyalty, and I intend to be well compensated for delivering you." The Resistance fighters looked stricken. "This whole palace is a decoy," the male Iconian said, his voice hollow. "The real Emperor is somewhere else." An alarm blared through the palace, a deafening klaxon that set Nolan's teeth on edge. On the view screen, Corvus leaned back in his chair, his expression triumphant. "I'd surrender if I were you," he said casually. "My men have you surrounded. There's no escape." As if on cue, the sound of marching boots filled the halls, hundreds of Imperial Guard converging on their position. The team exchanged grim looks, their weapons raised, ready to fight to the last. Nolan's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. But every option led to the same conclusion. They were trapped, outgunned, and outnumbered, with no hope of rescue. The Emperor had outplayed them, and now they would pay the price. The humans stood back to back, weapons raised, as the Imperial Guard flooded into the Emperor's chambers. The sound of marching boots and charging energy rifles filled the air. Nolan's finger tightened on the trigger of his M4, ready to go down fighting. Jack reached into his pack and pulled out a small, innocuous-looking device. "I've got a little surprise for these bastards," he said with a savage grin. "EMP grenade. Should fry their fancy tech." Nolan nodded curtly. "Do it." Jack armed the device and lobbed it into the center of the room. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash and a deafening bang. The Iconians' energy shields flickered and died, their weapons sparking and shorting out. The palace plunged into darkness as the power grid overloaded. In the chaos, Nolan's team moved, their eyes adjusted to the gloom. They fired short, controlled bursts, dropping the disoriented guards with ruthless efficiency. Ava ghosted through the shadows, her knife finding weak points in Iconian armor. Riker and Liam laid down suppressing fire, covering their advance. They fought their way through the palace, leaving a trail of broken bodies in their wake. The Iconians, so dependent on their high-tech gear, were woefully unprepared for the savagery of close-quarters combat. As they emerged into the courtyard, the Resistance fighters melted out of the shadows to join them. The male Iconian from before, his face grim, approached Nolan. "Corvus betrayed us all," he said. "He's been working with a faction in the government that wants this war to continue. They profit from the conflict." Nolan's jaw clenched. "And the Emperor?" "A puppet. The real power is behind the throne." The female Resistance fighter spoke up. "We have evidence of their corruption. Recordings, documents. If we can broadcast it..." "It could turn the people against them," Nolan finished. "Weaken their grip on power." The Iconians nodded. "But we need control of the communication network, and the Emperor must be removed to create a power vacuum." Nolan turned to his team. "New plan. Riker, Liam, go with the Resistance. Hack into their systems, get that evidence out there. Ava, Jack, with me. We're going after the Emperor." The team split up, each group focused on their mission. Nolan led his soldiers through the war-torn streets, guided by the intel the Resistance had provided. They reached the Emperor's true stronghold, a fortified bunker deep beneath the city. At the entrance they found Corvus waiting for them, flanked by his most elite troops. The Iconian's face was a mask of arrogance and disdain. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, Captain," he sneered. "But it ends here." Nolan stepped forward, his rifle leveled at Corvus's heart. "Surrender and you'll be treated fairly." Corvus laughed, a harsh bark devoid of humor. "Fairness from humans, I think not." The Iconian soldiers attacked, a wave of armored bodies and flashing energy blades. Nolan's team met them head-on, rifles bucking, knives slashing. It was a brutal melee, a whirlwind of violence and desperation. Nolan found himself face-to-face with Corvus, the Iconian sword clashing against his combat knife. They traded blows, neither giving ground, as the battle raged around them. "I challenge you, Corvus," Nolan growled. "Single combat, just you and me." Corvus hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Nolan knew he couldn't refuse, not without losing face in front of his men. Iconian tradition demanded he accept. "Very well, human," Corvus spat. "Prepare to die with honor." They circled each other, weapons at the ready. The fate of their worlds, of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. Nolan knew he couldn't falter, couldn't show weakness. Too much depended on this moment. With a roar, Corvus charged, his blade flashing. Nolan met him halfway, and their duel began in earnest. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal, each blow ringing out like a thunderclap. They were evenly matched, the Iconian's strength and speed against Nolan's skill and tenacity. The fight seemed to stretch on for an eternity, neither combatant able to gain the upper hand. But as they locked blades, their faces inches apart, Nolan saw something flicker in Corvus's eyes. A hint of doubt, of fear. The Iconian's resolve was wavering. Seizing the moment, Nolan disengaged and launched a furious assault, raining down blows from every angle. Corvus staggered back, his defense crumbling. With a final, desperate thrust, Nolan drove his knife into the Iconian's chest. Corvus fell to his knees, his sword clattering to the ground. He looked up at Nolan, his expression a mix of shock and grudging respect. "Well fought, human," he rasped, blood bubbling from his lips. Perhaps I was wrong about your kind." Nolan knelt beside his fallen foe, his voice soft. "It didn't have to be this way, Corvus. We could have had peace." The Iconian smiled faintly. "Peace, a beautiful dream. But dreams are for the dead." With a final shuddering breath, Corvus slumped to the ground, his eyes staring sightlessly at the sky. Around them, the battle had stilled, the Iconian soldiers lowering their weapons in stunned disbelief. Nolan stood, his face streaked with sweat and grime. He turned to his team, to the resistance fighters who had joined them. "It's over," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and grief. "The Emperor is gone, the conspiracy is exposed. Now we rebuild." As they emerged from the bunker, blinking in the sudden sunlight, Nolan couldn't help but feel a sense of hope amid the devastation. They had won, at a terrible cost, but they had won. And maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of a new era. An era of understanding, of cooperation, an era of peace. Ava and Jack charged through the bunker's corridors, their weapons blazing. Imperial guards fell before their onslaught, energy shields shattering under the hail of bullets. Jack lobbed a makeshift grenade, the explosive detonating with a deafening roar. The blast tore through a reinforced door, the metal twisting and warping. "Move!" Jack yelled, already charging through the smoking ruins. More guards poured into the corridor, their energy rifles spitting bolts of searing light. Ava and Jack dove for cover, the shots scorching the walls above their heads. "We need a new plan," Ava shouted over the din of battle. Jack's eyes darted around, searching for an advantage. He spotted a structural weakness in the corridor's ceiling. "Cover me!" He sprinted forward, dodging and weaving through the enemy fire. Reaching the weak point, Jack slapped a block of C4 against the ceiling. He dove back as Ava laid down a withering barrage, forcing the guards to take cover. Jack triggered the detonator, and the corridor collapsed with a thunderous boom, burying the Iconians under tons of rubble. Ava and Jack pushed forward, finally breaching the Emperor's inner sanctum. They stormed into the room, weapons ready, only to find themselves facing not just the Emperor, but a council of Iconian leaders. The room erupted into chaos, some councillors diving for cover, others reaching for weapons. Ava and Jack held their ground, their guns trained on the Emperor. "Surrender," Ava demanded. "It's over." The councillors froze, realizing they were outmatched. Arguments broke out among them, some demanding they fight to the last, others pleading for an end to the conflict. In the command center, Liam and Riker worked frantically alongside the resistance fighters. Riker's fingers flew over the console, lines of code streaming across the screen. "I'm in," he crowed. "Broadcasting now." Across the planet, screens flickered and changed. Corvus's treachery laid bare for all to see. The Iconian people watched in shock as the conspiracy unraveled before their eyes. In the streets, protests erupted, the populace rising up against their lying leaders. The Iconian military, torn between duty and truth, began to fracture. Back in the bunker, Nolan and Corvus fought tooth and nail, neither giving an inch. They were bruised and bloody, their armor rent and torn. But Nolan refused to yield, his human spirit driving him forward. Corvus lashed out with a desperate strike, but Nolan saw it coming. He countered, disarming the Iconian with a deft twist. Nolan grabbed Corvus, holding his own blade to the traitor's throat. "Call them off," Nolan growled. "Now!" Corvus, seeing no escape, reluctantly complied. The Imperial Guard lowered their weapons, standing down in the face of Nolan's ultimatum. With the Emperor and the Council under their control, Nolan's team gathered in the heart of the Iconian stronghold. They knew this was just the beginning. that the hard work of building peace still lay ahead. But for now, they had achieved the impossible. They had brought the Iconian Empire to its knees, not through superior firepower, but through courage, cunning, and sheer human determination. The galaxy would never be the same. The Emperor's decree of surrender echoed through the bunker's halls, a mix of relief and tension hanging in the air. Nolan and his team exchanged wary glances with the Iconian loyalists, the scars of battle still fresh on both sides. But before they could catch their breath, the sound of explosions rocked the complex. Zaxxon's rebel forces were launching an all-out assault. "Defensive positions," Nolan shouted, his rifle already in hand. "We hold this bunker at all costs." Corvus, his face grim, nodded in agreement. "My men will stand with you, human, for the sake of our world." They moved quickly, Iconian and human soldiers working side by side to fortify their defenses. Jack rigged makeshift traps and choke points, his demolition skills put to the test. Ava coordinated the placement of snipers, her keen eye picking out strategic vantage points. As the rebel Iconians breached the outer defenses, the bunker descended into a fierce firefight. Energy bolts sizzled through the air, met by the staccato bark of human assault rifles. Nolan and Corvus fought back to back, their movements fluid and synchronized, a dance of death and survival. In the heart of the chaos, Liam worked tirelessly to triage the wounded. His hands were slick with both human and Iconian blood as he applied tourniquets, sutured gashes, and administered field dressings. The lessons learned from Corvus during their journey proved invaluable as he treated the alien physiology. Riker, his face bathed in the glow of computer screens, waged a digital war against Zaxxon's propaganda machine. His fingers flew across the keyboard, countering every attempt to sway the Iconian public with truth and transparency. He patched into the Resistance's network, coordinating their efforts to rally support for the Emperor. In the streets of the capital, the Resistance fought tooth and nail against the rebel forces. They wielded captured Iconian weapons with grim determination, their ranks bolstered by defecting Imperial guards, sickened by Zaxxon's betrayal. The once pristine cityscape was transformed into a war zone, buildings crumbling under the onslaught of heavy weapons fire. As the battle raged on, Nolan knew they were running out of time. Zaxxon's forces were relentless and their own supplies were dwindling. He pulled Corvus aside, his voice low and urgent. "We can't win this defensive fight forever," Nolan said, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. "We need to cut the head off the snake, take out Zaxxon directly." Corvus's eyes narrowed, calculating the risks. "His command center will be heavily guarded. It's a suicide mission." Nolan's jaw tightened. "It's our only chance. We use the chaos of the battle to slip through their lines, strike hard and fast, end this coup before it destroys everything we've fought for." A slow smile spread across Corvus's face, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You humans never cease to amaze me with your audacity. Very well, Captain. Let us take the fight to Zaxxon." They gathered a small strike team, the best of both human and Iconian warriors. Ava and Jack were quick to volunteer, their faces set with grim determination. Together, they slipped out of the bunker, using the Resistance's intel to navigate the war-torn streets. The journey to Zaxxon's command center was perilous, every shadow a potential enemy, every sound a warning of danger. But Nolan's team was relentless, driven by a shared purpose that transcended species and culture. They were fighting not just for their own survival, but for the future of both their worlds. As they neared their target, the air crackled with tension. Zaxxon's elite guard stood between them and the rebel leader, their weapons charged and ready. Nolan and Corvus exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. There would be no surrender, no retreat, only victory or death. With a final nod, they charged forward, their weapons blazing, their battle cries echoing through the heart of the Iconian Empire. The fate of the galaxy would be decided here in the fire and blood of this moment. Nolan, Corvus, and their strike team moved through the shadows of Zaxxon's command center, their footsteps muffled by the soft soles of their boots. Corvus took point, his intimate knowledge of Iconian architecture guiding them through the labyrinthine corridors. Nolan and his human comrades followed close behind, their weapons at the ready, eyes scanning for any sign of trouble. They encountered a pair of guards patrolling a dimly lit hallway. Ava moved with fluid grace, her knife finding the gap between the first guard's helmet and chestplate. He crumpled to the ground without a sound. Jack dispatched the second guard with a silenced burst from his M4, the rounds punching through the Iconian's energy shield as if it were tissue paper. As they pushed deeper into the facility, they came across a control room filled with banks of computers and data terminals. Riker got to work, his fingers flying over the alien keyboard as he searched for any intel on Zaxxon's plans. His eyes widened as he uncovered a trove of encrypted communications between Zaxxon and the Zorgons, a rival empire with designs on both Iconian and human space. "Nolan, you need to see this," Riker said, his voice tight with tension. "Zaxxon's been selling out his own people. He's made a deal with the Zorgons to weaken both our species so they can swoop in and take over." Nolan's jaw clenched as he read the damning evidence. Zaxxon's betrayal ran deeper than any of them had imagined. They downloaded the files and moved on, more determined than ever to put an end to the treacherous commander's schemes. As they neared Zaxxon's inner sanctum, they found their path blocked by a massive blast door, its surface shimmering with an energy field. Riker pulled out his hacking tools, but after several tense minutes, he shook his head. "It's no use," he said, frustration etched on his face. "This is beyond anything I've ever seen. We'd need a high-ranking Iconian's biometric signature to even have a chance." Corvus stepped forward, his expression grim. He placed his hand on the biometric scanner, and to everyone's surprise, the energy field flickered and died. The blast door slid open with a hiss. "Corvus, how?" Nolan asked, stunned. The Iconian smiled sadly. "I was once a high-ranking officer before I left to become a smuggler. My clearance was never revoked." He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. "Nolan, I need you to promise me something. Stop Zaxxon no matter the cost. Don't let our peoples destroy each other." With that, Corvus charged through the open door, his weapon blazing. Nolan and the others followed, but it was too late. Corvus had sacrificed himself to buy them time, his body riddled with energy bolts from Zaxxon's elite guard. Nolan and his team fought their way into Zaxxon's chamber, where the rogue commander stood waiting, flanked by his most loyal soldiers. Zaxxon sneered at them, his face twisted with contempt. "You're too late, human," he spat. "The Iconian Empire has grown soft, weak. Only through conflict and conquest can we regain our former glory. The Zorgons understand this, and they will reward my loyalty." Nolan shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "You're wrong, Zaxxon. True strength lies in cooperation, in understanding. War will only lead to ruin for both our peoples." As they argued, Nolan could see doubt creeping into the faces of Zaxxon's guards. They had been loyal to their commander, but the revelation of his betrayal and the needless destruction caused by the coup were taking their toll. One by one, the guards lowered their weapons, stepping away from Zaxxon. The commander's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized he was being abandoned. "Traitors!" he screamed, his hand going for his sidearm. "I'll kill you all myself." But before he could raise his weapon, one of his own guards fired, the energy bolt striking Zaxxon square in the chest. The traitorous commander crumpled to the ground, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. Nolan let out a long breath, the tension draining from his body. It was over. Zaxxon was dead, and the coup had been quelled. He looked around at his team, battered and bruised but alive. They had done the impossible, and in doing so had given both their species a chance at a better future. As they emerged from the command center, they were greeted by a sea of Iconian faces, the news of Zaxxon's treachery having spread like wildfire. Nolan presented the evidence they had uncovered, the truth of the Zorgon conspiracy laid bare for all to see. The Emperor himself stepped forward, his expression a mix of gratitude and sorrow. He thanked the humans for their aid and their sacrifice, acknowledging that without them, the Iconian Empire would have torn itself apart. In the days that followed, The Emperor announced a series of sweeping reforms aimed at promoting cooperation and understanding between species. It was a new dawn for the Iconian people, one filled with hope and the promise of a better tomorrow. Nolan and his team watched from the sidelines, their mission accomplished. They had set out to capture an emperor, but in the end, they had done so much more. They had shown that even in the darkest of times, there was still a chance for peace, for unity. And that, Nolan thought, was a victory worth fighting for. The cheers of victory had barely faded when the news hit like a thunderbolt. A massive Zorgan invasion fleet, far larger than any seen before, was bearing down on Iconian space. The Zorgans had played their hand, betting everything on a swift, brutal assault to crush the fledgling alliance between humanity and the Iconians. Emperor Vortax's face was grim as he addressed the assembly of human and Iconian leaders. "We stand on the precipice of annihilation," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. "But we do not stand alone. Together we have a chance to weather this storm, to forge a future free from the shadow of conquest and subjugation." Nolan felt the eyes of the room upon him as the Emperor named him liaison to the Iconian military. It was a daunting task, but he met the Emperor's gaze with a nod of acceptance. He would not fail in this duty. Commander Ixaris, newly promoted and bearing the scars of the coup's final battle, clasped Nolan's arm in a warrior's greeting. "We have shed blood together, human," Ixaris said, his voice a rumble of determination. "Now we shall do so again, as brothers in arms." The planning sessions were intense, a clash of military doctrines and technological capabilities. It quickly became clear that the Zorgons outmatched them in sheer numbers and firepower. Conventional tactics would only lead to a swift and brutal defeat. "We need a new approach," Nolan said, his brow furrowed in thought. "We can't beat them at their own game, but maybe we don't have to. What if we combined our strengths? Human creativity and adaptability, Iconian technical prowess, hybrid weapons that the Zorgons won't see coming." Ixaris leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. "A bold strategy, but not without merit. Our greatest minds working together, it could change the face of this war." The forges of war burned hot and bright, as human and Iconian scientists and engineers labored side by side. Enhanced EMP devices took shape, each one capable of disabling an entire Zorgon battle group. Fusion-powered kinetic rounds were forged, their destructive potential unmatched by any shield. Adaptive stealth systems were woven into the very hulls of ships, rendering them ghosts in the void. As the Zorgan fleet entered the system, the Allied forces stood ready, a united front against the oncoming storm. Nolan stood on the bridge of the flagship, his team arrayed around him, each one a hardened veteran of this long and bitter war. "This is it," he said, his voice steady and sure. "This is where we hold the line, for Earth, for Iconia, for every world that stands in the path of Zorgon aggression. We fight and we win, together." The battle was joined, the void alight with the fire of 1,000 suns. Zorgon ships, sleek and deadly, clashed with the bulwarks of the Allied fleet. The new weapons proved their worth, Zorgon shields failing under the onslaught of fusion rounds, their systems crashing as EMP blasts washed over them. But the Zorgons adapted, their assault relentless and unyielding. Nolan watched the tactical display with a growing sense of dread as Allied ships winked out of existence, consumed by the firestorm of battle. "We need to end this," he growled, his fists clenched at his sides. "We need to cut the head off the snake." Ixaris nodded, his face a mask of determination. "The Zorgon flagship. If we can take it out, disrupt their command and control." "Fed could turn the tide," Nolan finished, a spark of hope kindling in his chest. "But it won't be easy. That ship will be heavily guarded, and the Zorgons won't go down without a fight." "Then it's a good thing we have a new toy to play with," Jack chimed in, a feral grin spreading across his face. "That prototype weapon, the one designed to fry Zorgon networks. I say we give it a test run." Nolan met Ixaris's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. It was a desperate gamble, but one they had to take. For the sake of their worlds, their peoples, They would risk everything on this single daring strike. As the strike team prepared to board the dropship, weapons checked and double-checked, Nolan took a moment to look at each of them in turn. His team, his friends, his family in arms. Ava, silent and deadly, her eyes alight with a fierce determination. Jack, all coiled energy and barely restrained violence, eager for the fight to come. Liam, steady and sure, ready to put his skills to the ultimate test. Riker, fingers flying over a datapad, his mind already racing through 1,000 scenarios and contingencies. And Axaris, the Iconian warrior, the unexpected ally who had become a true friend. In him Nolan saw a reflection of himself, a soldier fighting for a cause greater than any one being. "We've come a long way," Nolan said, his voice rough with emotion. "From enemies to allies, from strangers to brothers. Whatever happens out there, I want you to know, it's been an honor." Axaris clasped Nolan's arm, his grip firm and unyielding. "The honor is ours, Nolan of Earth. Now let us show the Zorgons the true strength of our alliance." As the dropship hurtled towards the Zorgon flagship, the chaos of battle raging around them, Nolan felt a sense of calm settle over him. This was it, the moment of truth, the point of no return. Come what may, they would face it together, human and Iconian united against the darkness. And in that unity, Nolan knew, lay the seeds of a brighter future for all. The strike team's boots pounded the metal deck as they charged through the Zorgon flagship's corridors. Nolan, Axaris, Jack and Ava moved as one, their weapons spitting fire at the elite Zorgon warriors who dared to stand in their way. The air reeked of ozone and burnt metal, the walls pockmarked with scorch marks from the intense firefight. "Jack, breaching charge on that door," Nolan shouted over the din of battle. Jack nodded, pulling the explosive from his belt and slapping it onto the reinforced door. "Fire in the hole." The team ducked behind cover as the charge detonated, blasting the door off its hinges. They stormed into the command center, weapons trained on the Zorgon High Commander. The Zorgon leader stood tall and proud, his dark eyes glinting with malice. "Welcome, warriors of the Doomed Alliance," he sneered. "You fought valiantly, but in vain. Your species are nothing more than insects, to be crushed beneath the might of the Zorgon Empire." Nolan stepped forward, his rifle aimed squarely at the High Commander's chest. "It's over. Your fleet is in ruins, your soldiers defeated. Surrender now, and we may show mercy." The High Commander laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Mercy? I seek no mercy from the likes of you. You think this war was about conquest? No, it was about extermination. The Zorgons are the master race, destined to rule the galaxy. Your alliance is an abomination, a perversion of the natural order. We will not rest until every last human and Iconian is wiped from existence." Axaris growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You're insane. No one species has the right to dominate all others." As the High Commander continued his tirade, Nolan's eyes darted to the prototype weapon slung across Axaris's back. The casing was cracked, the control panel flickering erratically. His heart sank as he realized the truth. The weapon was damaged, likely beyond repair. It would never disable the Zorgon network as planned. Nolan caught Axaris's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They had one chance to end this, to ensure the survival of their species, but it would come at a terrible cost. "Jack, Ava, fall back to the extraction point," Nolan ordered, his voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside him. "Transmit the Zorgon's plan to the fleet. Tell them it's been an honor." Ava's eyes widened. "Nolan, what are you—" "Go," Nolan barked. "That's an order, soldier." Jack put a hand on Ava's shoulder, his face grim. He understood the weight of Nolan's words. With a final nod to their commander, they turned and ran, leaving Nolan and Axaris alone with the High Commander. Axaris unslung the prototype weapon, his hands steady as he primed the detonator. "For our people," he said solemnly, "for the future." Nolan stood shoulder to shoulder with his Iconian brother, facing down the High Commander. "For the Alliance," he agreed. The High Commander's eyes widened as he realized their intent. "No," he screamed, "you can't." His words were lost in a blinding flash of energy as the prototype detonated. The flagship's command center vaporized instantly, along with everyone inside. The blast ripped through the vessel, setting off secondary explosions that tore the mighty warship apart from within. On the bridge of the Allied fleet's flagship, Jack and Ava watched in stunned silence as the Zorgan vessel vanished in a massive fireball. The Zorgan fleet, suddenly leaderless and directionless, fell into disarray. The human Iconian ships pressed their advantage, raining fire upon the confused and demoralized enemy. As the last Zorgan ship fled or fell, a cheer went up from the Allied fleet. They had won. Against all odds, they had triumphed. But for Nolan's team, the victory was bittersweet. They had lost their leader, their friend, and a piece of their very souls. In the days that followed, the Emperor himself spoke of Nolan and Xaris's bravery, hailing them as heroes who had sacrificed everything for the sake of their people. A day of remembrance was declared in their honor, a solemn tribute to the fallen warriors who had forged an unbreakable bond between human and Iconian. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.